One of my favorite songs of the season is There's Still My Joy, as sang by Roberta Flack, and there are many others who sang it. Indigo Girls, I think, sing, but there's a bunch of people sing it. But there's a great lyric that repeats over and over: for all my tears, for what I've lost, there's still my joy. And I am filled with joy today. I'm filled with a lot of joy today, even though this week has been filled with grief and loss over two of my friends. I still have joy. And I don't have joy because everything is going well, or I am not telling you I'm having joy just to convince myself or you that everything is going fine. I heard in Minnesota people say fine when it isn't fine. I'm not doing that. Some things are not fine, and I still have joy. I have joy because there is something beautiful and hopeful about this season of the year. As life in the world feels ever more chaotic and divisive, I am finding joy anyway. Joy in things that sometimes we take for granted. I'm finding joy in the songs that play as you go through stores, songs that remind you of the season. I'm finding joy in church, just sort of seeing smiles and jokes and laughter. I'm finding joy in my friends and in my family. But more than that, I'm finding joy in God. I know that sounds odd. You expect me to say something like that. I'm a preacher and a pastor. I'm supposed to say I find joy in God. But it's true. I'm not just saying it. I find joy in God. The truth is, I see a lot of pain and suffering, personal and communal. As a pastor, I hear and see some of the worst things that can happen to people. And I suspect you would understand if I were sad about all of that. And yet, I have joy. In this season of the year, joy and sadness occur together. But I love this season because joy gets to make her case. Joy gets to show up in full effect, sometimes starting right after Halloween. And it's not only the festive decorations and the Christmas carols that combat sadness and stoke joy. In Advent, our joy comes from our faith. It is a knowing that God is faithful to God's promise. It is a knowing that God is determined to do right by us. Even if storms and heartache have beaten us up, our joy comes from knowing that God has never wavered in God's covenant loyalty to us. We know it because we celebrate the birth of Emmanuel, God with us. That is our evidence. That is our evidence that no matter how crummy the world is, no matter how bad it gets, that God remains committed to us, even as we exist in a kind of exile. And that is something that Israel will learn after years in exile. In this reading today, Isaiah's prophecy of deliverance was probably hard to hear for a people who had settled in a foreign land, who had accommodated themselves to an empire that did not know God, and who had taken on identities as citizens, consumers, and laborers in that empire. And while they adjusted to life outside of Israel, they assumed that the covenant God made with David was null and void. So they put their heads down and they started working. They got busy trying to be a part of the world. They got busy living. They were going to work. It was just the routine of living. And some of them got rich. Many of them remained poor, but that was just the way it was. This is how it works. Life was hard. And God's absence was so disorienting that some of them doubted God's power to save them. And even if they believed that God could save them, some of them doubted God's will to save them. So, this is the way of the world. But Isaiah says a word that breaks through this routine. Isaiah comes with a prophecy that I'm sure that some people said, Isaiah must be drinking something. Because Isaiah says, come home now. Come back to God. It's time to celebrate because God has extended an invitation to you. Here's what it is, Israel. You have been forgiven. You are now redeemed. It's all over. Come home. Now you are more than just consumers and laborers. You are more than just citizens of Babylon or Assyria. You are now, as you've always been destined to be, you are God's people. You are witnesses to God. Your very lives, your very words are witnesses to God. Come home now. And here's where it gets tricky. This is where people start to doubt what Isaiah is saying. Do not try to find your joy. Do not try to find your connection. Do not try to find what would make you feel good in the things that you own and the things that you purchase. Come. Whatever you need, God has for you. It's free. That's where Isaiah went wrong. Everything you need is free. It's free. So do not spend your money on bread that does not feed you. Do not work for things that do not satisfy. Stop spinning your wheels for things that will not fill you up. God's table is set. Everything is free. Just show up. You're not joyous. The prophecy said, it's all there. You don't have to do, you've been forgiven. Everything you did wrong, I've forgotten it already. Every ways you failed, I don't even remember. Right now, it's all about celebrating. Let's eat. You don't have to pay for it. The table is set. Come and sit down. Enjoy yourself. See, this is what the church forgets to tell us. I don't think I ever heard this growing up. They may sing it a little bit, but they don't really mean it. If you told me it was free, I would have stopped fretting all night long because I stole a piece of candy from the jar at church. That I didn't have to work for it. It's free. Come get it. That is a source of joy. And if there is any doubt, though, and I knew there was doubt, you could see the doubt when Isaiah said it. Come eat, come buy and eat without money. Come and drink. You don't need any money. I could see the doubt. You could see people saying, Isaiah, what are you talking about? But if there is any doubt that God intends to forgive and restore God's covenant with Israel, God assures them that I am making with you right now a new covenant. See, that's how God works. Out of nowhere. In the middle of exile, God simply says, stop. I'm acting now. Get over yourselves. I'm forgiving you. Come eat. You're going to have redemption in my steadfast. You remember that covenant I gave to David so long ago? David's been long dead. It's all over. But you remember what I told David? I told David that your kingdom will live forever. I'm telling you now, David may be gone, but I am holding myself to that covenant to you right now. David reigns live through you right now. And God describes it not in legalistic terms, not in terms that you have to fill out a contract, not in terms of exchange and transaction. God says, my covenant is my steadfast, pure love for David. See, you didn't even react. Steadfast, pure love of God. See, you're still not reacting. Let me say it again. Steadfast, pure love. All right, so let me give you something that you can probably relate to. So when you first fall in love and you start writing each other's name, I love you, think about that feeling all the time, never ending. That's how God feels about you. This is a cause for great joy in a life filled with tears and loss. Again, there was some in there, the ones who arraigned on the parade. They will object. But this is not how the world works. There is no free lunch. You've heard it. There is no free lunch. Even churches have gotten in on the act. There is no free grace, which is an oxymoron because if grace is grace, it's free. You don't have to pay for it. God gives it to you whether you deserve it or not. That's favor. That's grace. So even now, there were people who go, oh, there is no free lunch. It doesn't make sense to tell us to come buy and eat without money. We are citizens. We are consumers. We are laborers. And as long as we do the things that we're supposed to do, as long as we focus on being the best citizens, the most eager consumers, and the most productive laborers, we'll be okay. We'll get rich. That's what we need. That's how it's called transaction and exchange. That's how the economy works. Isaiah said, no, not in God's economy. Seek God while God can be found. Call on God while God is near. Oh, but they said, that's not how the world works. And God replies, my ways are higher than your ways, and my thoughts are higher than your thoughts. God does not work in transaction, in exchange. I don't care how many times they tell you. That's not how God works. God is not like some marketplace where you have to show up with your credit cards and your good credit. God is not a marketplace where you have to be perfect before you get there. God is not some marketplace where you have to go to the gym and get all suited up and good looking so you can come to God and say, I deserve what you have for me. That's not how God works. You show up just the way you show up, warts and all. Overweight, underweight, tired, drunk, not drunk, hangover, sick. Show up. It's free. God has it for you. And this is why we have joy. Because whatever we are, God can take it and use us. God can make it right. That's the gift. That's the gift. The gift is that we can show up and say, whatever is wrong with me, whatever I'm feeling, whatever sadness, for all my tears, for all what I've lost, I'm not feeling it. This is not working for me. This world is hard for me. Show up to God. Seek God while God can be found. Call on God while God is near. That's your currency. And you don't have to do anything to deserve it. Oh, Mary, the mother of Jesus, knew it. She knew it. And her joy was infectious when she saw what God was doing through her. Oh, some people would have been afraid and they wouldn't know what to do. But when she realized what God was up to, when she saw what God was doing in Elizabeth's life, she just broke out in song and she said, my soul magnifies the Lord, and my spirit rejoices in God, my Savior. For God has looked on with favor on the lowliness of God's servant. The mighty one has done great things for me. Sing it, Mary. The mighty one has done great things for me, and holy is God's name. God has shown strength of arm and has scattered the proud in the thoughts of their hearts, and brought down the powerful from their thrones, and lifted up the lowly, and filled the hungry with good things, and sent the rich away empty. Mary knew it. Mary knew that she did not have to have currency of the marketplace for God to do God's thing. Mary was filled with joy when everyone else said, you should be afraid, little girl, because your life is going to be difficult. Oh, Mary said, no, no, it's a gift from God. Isaiah's prophecy is an invitation to leave behind the hustle and bustle of the empire's economy and accept God's call to come home, to feast at the banquet of sustenance available to us for free. It means that in God we are more than just citizens and consumers and laborers. It is a gospel telling us that we are forgiven. We are redeemed. We are God's beloved, bearing witness with our lives that God's steadfast love is available to all God's children. Oh, I know it's not an easy invitation to accept, especially when people keep telling us we're this and we're that, or that we don't deserve this or we don't deserve that, especially when we live in a place where something's value is predicated on the hefty price you pay for it. It's hard to accept an invitation to show up and let God give you things when we've been told that there is no free lunch. But that's what God does. That God gives. And God said, I'm giving my steadfast, pure love. Steadfast, pure love. I want us to meditate on the thought of that. Steadfast, never-ending, pure love. No strings attached. No strings attached. Steadfast, pure love. And so I know we know something about God. Even in our tears and our loss and our grief, we know something about God. Even though we've been loaded down with so much junk and so much bad theology, it's in there. So it's like a faint sound keep telling us that we know something about God. And this season is a reminder. And so give in to this season's promptings to love and to share. See ourselves as the forgiven and redeemed people of God. Take our place at God's banquet table with all the diverse and beautiful creation around us. Accept God's gift of God's self to the world, Emmanuel, God with us. You see, God makes possible lasting things that money cannot buy. You know it. What Isaiah prophesied and what Israel came to know about God's free gift of forgiveness and abundance is that God is unwavering and unshakable in God's steadfast, pure love for us. And so as we continue to hang in there with God, and that's what I know you're doing, even when it gets crappy, as we continue to hang in there with God, amid our pain and our heartache and our tears and our failure, I hope we discover anew each day that we are always invited to come and eat at God's table without money. Remember that invitation and sing without hesitation, beyond my tears, beyond what I've lost, there's still my joy.